Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in on another episode. Today we're going to be putting the clutch in the classic SAAB 900, and as promised I went ahead and got a complete luck rep set kit. This kit comes complete with everything you need. Comes with the clutch disc, comes with the pressure plate, the clutch release bearing, and the pilot bearing, as well as a clutch alignment tool, though I doubt highly you won't need the clutch alignment tool. And this is due to the fact that the transmission drive shaft does a much better job at aligning the clutch disc in the center point of the clutch when you're putting it all together. And I think that's all you'll need. Some basic tools. You will need a pry bar. You'll need some patience. I think that's about it. Oh, you will need a filter for all the F-bombs that you're going to drop when doing this job. So let's get started. To get started, I would need to get the pressure plate of the new clutch kit compressed for installation. To do this, I had to purchase a second set of pressure plate lock rings and utilize the driver tool to help compress the springs. This is a genuine SAAB tool. It is not intended to be used to compress a clutch pressure plate, but its intended use is actually for driving in seals or bearing races of some sort. To do this, you will need an old spare brake disc to place the pressure plate upon. The friction surface of the pressure plate should be touching the top of the disc. This way, when the pressure plate springs are compressed, the edges of the plate will be allowed to rise and the springs will be allowed to compress downward. In this image, you can see how the driver sits atop the springs. You would then move the disc and the spring plate over to a shop hydraulic press and compress the pressure plate. Once the plate is compressed, the spring lock can be inserted. Should you perform this procedure, be sure to wear safety glasses and other appropriate safety equipment and exercise extreme caution. Alright, so the best way to do this if you're working on the car, you're by yourself. My seats are in horrible condition, so I'm just going to use a piece of conduit here. This is just a regular piece of pipe. Okay. The best thing to probably use is like a hood strut from Lyle or Leslie, that company. But if you don't have that, you can use a piece of pipe. If you want to keep your seats from getting damaged, you can just appropriately put, padding on one side. And what I like to do, and of course this is only going to work if you got hydraulic pressure, just press in the clutch pedal a little bit, press it against the seat, and then just scoot the seat all the way forward until it stops. And that will hold the hydraulic pressure for the slave cylinder open. Once you get the slave cylinder open, you can start to put in the locks for this pressure plate to keep the pressure plate springs open, and this will allow you to get out the slave cylinder as well as the clutch pressure plate disc simultaneously. So the next thing we're going to need to do is take off this cover, and you just simply take a flathead screwdriver, pry off the cover, and take off this deal here. Okay, let's set those aside. Alrighty, then there is I think they call it a mixer. Okay, set that aside, and then you're going to take, I like to put a screw, let's get a little close up on that. If you look inside there, that hole is threaded, of course. I like to put like a appropriately sized screw in there, and then just kind of pry the shaft out using that. Okay, I just like to take a little pry bar here and just lightly pry against the case, and that will remove the shaft. Okay, and it has a locking ring. There's a mechanism in there. I think there's a ring in there that locks that, because you do have to give it sometimes you have to give it a couple of tugs. Okay, and that's far enough to get the slave cylinder out right there. So before I go any further, I've got a jug here. This is just a water jug that I had. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up the bleed screw. Okay, kind of try to get some of that fluid out. Let's see if I got the appropriate size here. And this is just to sort of relieve pressure on the clutch. You probably don't have to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway, because I'm going to re-bleed the clutch later after I get everything together. And going to take that same pry bar, just kind of give it just a little bit of, to kind of release some of that fluid. And then while I got it back, it's going to spring back anyway. This is purely just to release some of the fluid into the line. You can see some of the fluid came out. I'm going to go ahead and tighten down that line just to give that extra little bit of push back. Get that fluid out. So then after that's done, I'm going to go ahead and start removing the bolts for the pressure plate. Alright, so once you get all of the pressure plate bolts out, you can go ahead and get the slave cylinder out of the car. So you got the shaft hanging out here. You can go ahead and get this pressure plate out. This should be fairly simple. We're going to see if it's fairly simple. It's loose. And you should be able to just jump this guy right out. Okay. Let's see if we can slide both the pressure plate and this out at the same time. I did this once before. Don't know if I can do it this time. Let's see. You know what? I'm gonna get brake fluid everywhere, but let's see. It don't matter. Cause, well, I'll find it.
anyone who's ever put a clutch in a SAAB 900 and they tell you it takes 30 minutes, they're a damn liar. Especially without the big tool. There is a specialty tool that you can buy to get the slave cylinder out, but this tool costs $658. It's almost $700. This tool, it's a big, okay, so the slave cylinder sits in here like this, okay, and then the bearing goes here. There's a tool that you can put, it is like a cup, two-piece cup that goes around the bearing, and there's a very large joint, and there's a pivot. There's like two pivots that go here, side by side. And you put this thing in, and it's like a really large lever, and you can pull back the lever. And once you pull back the lever, it will push the springs in for you. So you can basically get the tool in there, but I got the tool in there with hydraulic pressure. Now, supposedly, I guess when you put that lever in there, you can, you know, I don't know, you can get the tool in there and get it out, but there's no need for that.
In one of the SAAB videos that I put out, someone left a comment about needing to see how a clutch pilot bearing could be changed. So I think I'll take the time now to kind of give some instruction on how this can be done. This is fairly simple. There are two ways to do this. First, you can use a bearing seal puller. Here's an image of a bearing seal puller that you can use. Okay, you can take the hook end of the puller, slide it in behind the inner race of the bearing, and tap the device with a hammer. Now this will cause the bearing to slide outward. Due to the limited working space, you would need to angle the tool to extract the bearing, of course, and if that doesn't work, simply remove the flywheel bolts and flywheel and drive out the bearing with a driver or an appropriately sized socket. And of course, installation is the reverse of removal on that procedure. So after I was able to get everything out of the car and compare the two clutches side by side, I immediately noticed that, you know, the SAAB's clutch disc is much larger in diameter than the Luck. And I also began to wonder if I had purchased the wrong parts, but I remembered I had seen one of these before, and you know, I had to remember that, hey, you know, these 900 clutches, the factory ones anyway, they aren't that big, and you know, because of this, a lot of times they would slip under heavy acceleration and high torque applications. But clearly, I did a little bit of research. Clearly, the previous owner had performed like an upgrade. This is actually a 225 millimeter clutch disc from a later 900, I think a 1995, or it came from a 9.3. So if you were looking to do an upgrade, you can actually upgrade your clutch to the 225 millimeter units, and you can actually buy this from Modern Classic SAAB. So a little bit of information on those of you who'd like to do this upgrade. Those parts are interchangeable. I also noticed that the real reason made that discovery really quick when I noticed this. I looked at these parts. The real reason my SAAB's clutch was no longer working was because I screwed up, and I actually put the clutch disc in backwards. See those scarred spring holders on the disc? Those were touching the flywheel bolts. Very minimal damage, but it just sucks that I made such a silly mistake. I'm glad this just happened to my car and not a customer's or someone else's. I'd be really upset with myself about that. But this is typically what happens when you get in a hurry and try to finish something too quickly. Time in the dealership was kind of limited, and I was trying to get this done as quickly as possible, and I guess I just wasn't paying attention. Lesson learned. Going back in once more, I'm using the Lee Kelso method. This works pretty well. So far, I've had no issues getting the slave cylinder back in using this procedure. So to get the slave cylinder and the pressure plate back in, you must continuously rotate the slave cylinder back into its place. And at the same time, you will need to rotate the pressure plate around the proper position before aligning it with the mounting pins. A very tedious task, but it can be done. Now once you get the slave cylinder in place and the zip ties removed, you will need to elevate the clutch disc so that the drive shaft can be inserted for proper clutch alignment. When the drive shaft and the disc are aligned, push in the drive shaft, install the mixer, reattach the drive cover, and then you can move on to bleed the clutch hydraulics.
Okay, so now that once you get the clutch pressure plate in, you got all your bolts mounted, and we've got the slave cylinder in place. We've got all the bolts mounted for the slave cylinder. Okay, all three are in. I'm gonna go ahead and re-bleed the clutch. I did take these lines off to release the fluid so I could actually compress this backwards. So I'm gonna go ahead and bleed the clutch so that I can get regain my hydraulic pressure. And I'm going to do the same thing as when I put the locks in the old plate. I'm going to press the clutch pedal forward so it'll apply the pressure to the forks, to the pressure plate springs actually. And then I'm going to remove these spring locks and get it out of the car. So basically, if you're going to be doing this job by yourself, you're going to need two sets of these. I just bought these. One set is a lot fatter than the other one, and those fit in the SAAB plates. These are kind of thin and skinny, as you can see down there, and they fit better in the plates for the clutches. I'm bleeding the clutch with my pressure bleeder, and I suggest this is how you do these. This is from I've actually had this bleeder for several years. It's from Motive Products. There's a website, www.motiveproducts.com. The power it says hydraulic brake and clutch pressure bleeder. So it works great, and basically this item works like this. It has a lock on it. You pump up manually and you lock it like that, and it has a pressure gauge on it. Now right now it's showing right around, I don't know, somewhere between 15 and 20 psi. So I'd say somewhere around 17 pounds of pressure. You can pump this up anywhere between 15 to 20, no more than 20 psi. Any more than that, and you may be putting too much pressure on that reservoir there. Now, when I got this tool, I actually modified it so it actually comes just a straight line with this cap. What I did, I put a valve in here. Okay, so you can see fluid on this side, but none of the fluid will travel through until I open this valve. So this allowed me to control the pressure of the fluid into the reservoir and how much fluid is going through. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and slowly open this up. You start to see the fluid move. And I typically don't open it all the way until I got the drain here open. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this, get my wrench, and then we're gonna go ahead and bleed the clutch. I got a jug here, just a milk jug, water jug actually, and here's a line, and I actually have an old, there's an old bottle I was using to bleed this with. You just take this here and put that on the line there, and we're gonna open this up. That's already open, okay. All right, and so you can see some fluid is already starting to emerge from the line. Gonna add the pressure back. And there you go. You start to see the fluid coming out of the clutch pressure system. You see some air bubbles. There's some air bubbles. And basically what we're going to do, we're going to keep watching this until there's no more air bubbles coming out of the fluid line. Once the fluid starts being clear and free of bubbles, I'll let it go for maybe another 10 to 12 seconds. You can see there's hardly any more air coming out. I'm going to set this flat. Okay, it looks like it's almost free of air. Should be free of air. Yep. Oh, we got a few more bubbles. Okay, I think that'll do it. So just go ahead and close that line. Grab a wrench. Sometimes it wants to rotate back by itself. Let's go ahead and okay, and then we're going to snug the line. Guys, having a pressure bleeder makes bleeding the clutch or brakes on any car super duper easy. Okay, so now that the system seems to be bled, I'm going to release the pressure from the reservoir and close that off. Okay, and then I'm going to go inside the car, press the clutch, and see if we got any clutch pressure.
Once the clutch hydraulics were bled, I decided to replace the dreaded shift rod tapered pin, and then I adjusted the shift linkage. You can see the specialty adjustment tool installed. Once you place the car in third gear and lock the shifter assembly inside the car, insert the tool in the bottom and tighten everything down, and this part was fairly easy.
Alright guys, that's going to wrap up today's video on the classic SAAB 900. I'd like to say thanks for tuning in and watching. I appreciate your support. So how long did this job actually take me? Realistically, it took about 4.5 hours. And the reason for that is mainly because I'm working outside in direct sunlight. I don't advise you do that I did it because, well, I didn't want to try to tow the car somewhere and then work on it inside of a shop. Trying to avoid a towing bill. It's going to be kind of expensive. And I knew that if I just took breaks, regular breaks in between, I could get it done. So you'll probably see that in the video where the lighting in the video would change, and that's because I would wait. The sun would be out in some shots, and then there'd be cloud cover, and it'd be a little dark, and then it would get light, then it'd dark, you know. So inconsistent lighting, and that's primarily where that came from. It's because I was taking breaks, but it runs and drives fine. Gonna do it wouldn't be a real first drive video because I was actually driving the car after I got it running the first time, riding around with no plates on it, taking a risk like that. Got a funny story about how I ran out of gas, and I really thought that I was going to get caught, and I rode right through an area and ran out of gas right where there's it's like a hotbed for sheriffs, and they're always out there. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm going to get a ticket, I'm going to have to pay a large towing bill, I'm going to get the car impounded and all this type of stuff. But actually nothing happened. It was quite funny. But yeah, if you enjoy this content, or you like watching this video about the SAABs or the Mazda Protege, click the like, share, and subscribe buttons, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.